The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Let's start today with some uplifting news. We rarely have positive news on the bonus show or on the regular show. We have neutral news, but rarely positive news. North and South Korea have agreed to march together under a unified Korea flag at the Winter Olympics that are upcoming in South Korea next month. They've also agreed to field a joint women's ice hockey team. And that's an amazing and lovely thing. Now, of course, Trump's taking credit for it. That's the sick reality of it, which is this has nothing to do with Trump. This is that the North and South have been able to have some peace talks and actually come up with something to do, combined with the lucky timing of the Winter Olympics. But Trump and his administration are saying the fact that this took place is because of Trump's statements about North Korea. But of course, any logical person would say, wait, how is saying that that fat kid from North Korea or that he has a bigger button, how is that going to foster relations between North and South Korea? It doesn't really make any sense. It's a good thing, but why are we praising Trump for it?
I'd have to imagine that if Trump and the White House do take credit for this move, then maybe they would want to retract their decision and, I don't know, just have their separate ice hockey teams and maybe even stay out of the Olympics.
Right. Trump loudly taking credit for this could, if anything, damage the deal that has been struck. Now, I was thinking about it from the point of view of North Korean propaganda. Within North Korea, and I know a lot of people in our audience know this, they've been towing basically since the separation of Korea into North and South Korea that they're eventually going to have reunification back into one Korea. And of course, it doesn't seem particularly likely. Some people would say it's absolutely ridiculous to think that that would ever happen. But within North Korea, if you decide we'll be at the Olympics under a flag of unified Korea, that's definitely going to be used within North Korea to say, see, we are getting closer to reunification. Not that it'll really matter one way or another, but you have to just imagine the way that the Kim regime is going to spin this.
Because a lot of their propaganda is such a stretch, right? Like they went undefeated in one of the World Cup championships or something, and they
they've claimed that before? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, I've heard a lot of other sports-related claims, including that Kim Jong-il had holes in one and like 18 holes of golf. He had all holes in one or something like that. But I've not heard the World Cup one. Do they even have a soccer team in North Korea?
I think they do, and they qualified maybe in 2010.
For the World Cup?
Right, and I remember they were losing to, I think, Germany, something like 5-0.
Yep.
At which point they cut access in North Korea, so they couldn't watch the game anymore. And they later reported that North Korea came back and won.
Miraculous recovery in that game. So listen, this is a good thing. I think it would be a mistake to think that it's a path to reunification. The only way I see reunification happening would be if the Kim regime is defeated and or ousted in some way, and North Korea is sort of rolled into the westernized capitalist status quo of South Korea. But the idea of reunification, the way that Kim Jong-un talks about it, is an absolute fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this whole participating in the Olympics thing is just seen as a concession from North Korea, where it really shouldn't be. Because if you're comparing that with, them amping up their ballistic missile capabilities or continuing to starve their own people, how can we see this as a valid trade-off for any of that stuff? You know?
It's good only in that it shows that at least someone at the negotiating table agreed to something that has absolutely no downside and shouldn't even be remotely controversial. But in the context of their erratic and sort of belligerent behavior, it doesn't really change the status quo of how we see the regime, does it?
Especially because I don't think this is going to be a very well-rated Olympics, too. I mean, the Winter Olympics from the get-go starts off at much fewer ratings than does the Summer Olympics.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then, on top of that, Russia's not participating.
I think that there's actually another factor, which is that, in general, with way more stuff that people can do, and phones, and Netflix, and, Amazon Prime or whatever, these live sporting events, big picture, just seem to attract less attention. And the same thing applies to those award shows like the Golden Globes and the Oscars and whatever that seem to have permanently declining ratings. I just think people in general, like society, is moving beyond the community experience of saying this is happening now.
Right,
we're all going to watch it now. Yeah, I think that that's the paradigm that's kind of shifting. California has had a number of different efforts to split off or split into different factions or states or countries. And there's an interesting report about a couple of different ones dating all the way back to the state of Jefferson in 1941, when there was an effort to take California's 3 northernmost counties and separate into its own state. The idea being that different regions of California, particularly during the 20th century, had drastically different natural resources. And the idea was, in Northern California, it's timber. And I think that there's also some ore supplies in Northern California. And that's separate from gold rush stuff, which I think also was in Northern California. Anyway, the idea was, hey, we could split off and we could be a really great, viable state or something like that. And obviously it didn't happen. And there's been a number of other ideas dating all the way back more recently, even as recently as 2014. I think this is very interesting because we often talk about like the secession of Texas, or some southern states say, hey, we'll take our Civil War loss and walk away and make our own little country. They'd be completely not viable economically because those states are heavily subsidized, not only by the federal government, but by the blue states, really. California, depending on how you chopped it up, actually could do this and be financially viable.
I'm just worried about the precedent that it would set.
Of course.
And I understand, California is the most populous state in the entire country.
Right.
And they are very diverse. I mean, you have at least 3 states there. But if they decide to split up because they have some rural-urban divide or economic divide among the different industries that they have, couldn't we do the same thing over here in Massachusetts? We could say, oh, well, the eastern part of the state is, Cambridge and Boston and Cape Cod. It's so much different than the rural areas out west.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that I think this is a good idea. I'm not saying that I think it should be encouraged. I'm not saying anything even about the legal infrastructure that would support or deny that this is a possibility. I'm interested in the reality that usually the people that want to split off are the ones that actually depend on not splitting off to survive economically. And California is one that, depending on how it was done, could actually be economically viable.
Yeah, if California was its own country, it would have the 5th largest economy in the entire world.
Right. And I think that the population, I think California is roughly equivalent to Argentina in terms of population, at least at one point. Maybe California is like 33 million and Argentina is like 38 million.
Are you a big Cali guy?
I do like
there?
California. I'm going out there in April, and it's been a few years since I've been out there. The things I don't like about it are the traffic in a lot of parts of the state. I really don't like that. And by the way, my experience in California, I'm one of these coastal elites that you read online about. Like, I've never been anywhere more than 20 miles, maybe even 15 miles inland in California. And I know it's a totally different ballgame. As soon as you go like 20 or 30 miles inland, it's basically conservative rural desert. It's a totally different ballgame.
You're heading towards like Death Valley, right? At that
Exactly.
point.
But in my experience in San Francisco, the wine country north of San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, it's all right on the coast. I really like it, and I know Los Angeles gets a bad rap, but there's a lot of great neighborhoods in Los Angeles. I could see myself living in a place like LA if it weren't so far from family. San Francisco is one of my top, it's in my top 5 cities in the US, which for me are Boston, in no particular order, Boston, New York, Miami, San Francisco, and I mean, what else would I put there? I guess maybe DC or Chicago would be up there.
That's pretty
subsequent to me.
Yeah.
I'm big on California. I do like it.
I am too. And just one more point on the state of Jefferson thing.
Yep.
They were actually very, very close to becoming a state. The only
That's right.
reason why was because they were debating it at the end of 1941. And do you know what stopped those negotiations?
Pearl Harbor?
Pearl Harbor, December 7th.
Interesting.
Yeah. Otherwise, they probably would be a state today.
The state of Jefferson.
What
That's
could have been?
interesting. It would have been Weed City, because that's Northern California is like
right.
Humboldt County, and where it's like all these off the grid. I mean, for a long time, even before decriminalization, that's been sort of pot country for a while. Earlier this week, 22 state attorneys general filed a federal lawsuit against the FCC, responding to their repeal of Obama-era net neutrality regulations. And what is going to happen? Probably nothing. So I think it's great. We've been talking about the upcoming Senate vote under the Congressional Review Act to reinstate net neutrality. And I've told you, even if it were to pass in the Senate, it's not going to pass the House. And even if it did, Trump's not going to sign it into law. 22 lawsuits here, 22 different states filing lawsuits against the FCC for what they did. I think that this is fantastic, but I see one solution to the issue of net neutrality.
Vote them out?
Vote them out. That's the solution. That really is it. I think to the extent that these lawsuits or the Senate vote increase awareness of what's going on, that's absolutely fine, well, and good. But we need to vote them out. And we had a chance to vote in November. And by 77,000 votes across 3 states, Donald Trump became president of the United States. And this is what happened. And it sucks. And people are going to suffer. And their prices on internet and cable packages are going to go up. But we've got to vote them out, right? The lawsuits now are not going to change this, period.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the FCC has 5 members, and then the majority of the membership is determined by which party is in power.
Right.
In the executive branch, right?
3 to 2, 2 to 3 is usually how all the votes go.
Okay. So, I mean, I'd have to imagine that the majority of Republicans even support net neutrality.
Are you talking about Republican voters? Yes, voters do. Voters do.
And actually, these net neutrality gutting provisions will probably most negatively affect like conservative alt-right websites. So it seems.
You think so? Well,
Yeah.
why would they affect? Why do you think that would be the case?
Because they're not going to be seen as friendly towards telecom companies. I'd have to imagine, like they would be specifically slowed down. Wouldn't you think so?
I don't
because
know.
You know they're part of the counterculture.
Yeah.
They're not towing the corporate line.
But couldn't you say the same about progressive independent media? Like, I don't know if there's going to be that political split. I mean, I think they will be affected. I just don't know that they're going to be disproportionately affected. I think it'll be more of a corporate, non-corporate split rather than like left-right.
Right. I mean, I think these corporations tend to be a little bit on the side of the liberals, but maybe that was more of a throwaway than anything else.
Which corporations are we talking about, though?
Like Verizon, AT&T.
You think? I don't see. I mean, you're not alone in thinking that, but I see those companies as totally corporatist, and in fact, the cable lobby.
Apolitical, you think?
Not apolitical, but just in favor of less regulation, which tends to be more of a right-wing point of view. But the reason I point it out is if you look at the money, I'm sure it's not a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
But the cable lobby and those companies, they tend to give a lot to both parties.
They do.
Just kind of greasing the wheels no matter who's in office.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. At any rate, I just think that, if Republican voters had known that voting for Trump also meant gutting net neutrality, maybe they would have reconsidered.
Some, but a lot of them voted because, as I said on the program, he's against abortion now, or because he said the Bible is his second favorite book or whatever.
For most, net neutrality is probably not a voting issue, but if you look among millennials and people who are tech savvy, I'd have to imagine that they rank it as more important.
That's kind of a bummer, actually, because I've said before that whatever political issue is your issue, be it education or LGBT rights or whatever, it's impacted by campaign finance and by media coverage of that issue, and media coverage of any issue is impacted by internet freedom and net neutrality. So it's like a meta issue. Everybody should care about net neutrality no matter what their political positions are, and it's kind of a bummer that it's not a voting issue. But I agree with you. I don't think it is a voting issue by and large.
So you don't think that the attorneys general suing is going to make any difference? You don't think that the bill in Congress right now is going to make any difference?
I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't think it will, no.
Which one do you think has a better shot?
Of making a difference?
Even if one has a 10% chance and one has a 15% chance?
I would say the lawsuits have a bigger chance than the Congressional Review Act vote.
Me too.
I don't know. But, man, it's depressing what's going on.
Why do we have to end on this one?
Well, I know it's because I decided to start with a positive story, and now we're ending with a nightmare story, Anyway, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong because it is not a great state of affairs. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.